All right, ready, Rebecca?
I am. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This is Women in Data Boston Chapter's virtual symposium. This is the final segment of our three-part series that has been happening across the month of June, throughout which we have shared perspectives on career journeys and pathways within data and analytics, as well as highlighting important areas of application within various industries. Tonight's discussion will last for about 20 to 25 minutes and will be followed by a brief Q&A session. Please submit any questions in the comment section to the right of the YouTube live screen, or if you're joining up via Zoom right now, please submit questions in the chat section to the right. However, to submit questions in the YouTube live comment section, you will need a YouTube account. I will be monitoring both comment sections throughout the course of the talk. For those of you who may be new to Women in Data, we are a nonprofit organization with a mission to increase diversity in data careers. We provide awareness, education, and advancement to women in the tech industry, specifically in analytics, data science, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. Today's speaker is Thushy Muruges, DEI team member and lead of the Founders Program at Insght Data Science. Among her many accomplishments, Thushy has made a consistent effort throughout her career to focus on diversity and inclusion and bring actionable process change to promote DEI in the workplace. She currently leads a diversity and inclusion in Tech Leaders Research Group in the Bay Area. Today, Thushy is going to highlight some DEI best practices, including strategies that employers can use to successfully create a diverse employee pipeline and recommended places where companies can go to seek out diverse candidates, as well as advice to job applicants who want to join companies that want to emphasize diversity and equity in their workplace. We're very excited to have Thushy joining us today. And with that, I'm going to turn the floor over to her.
Great. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. And Rebecca, thank you for the intro and thanks for having me. I just wanted to put my contact information out now, and then I'll also have it at the end of the presentation. So feel free to reach out to me with any questions or any follow-up information that you need. So let's get started. I wanted to start a little bit by talking about Insght Fellows Program and what we're doing. Insght is a 7-week training program that allows top-tier scientists, engineers, data professionals to upskill and level up their skill sets and connect with companies that are hiring in that role. Whether it be data science, data engineering, machine learning. We run 3 sessions a year in 6 physical locations and 1 remote program, including a location in Toronto. And with COVID, we're all remote at the moment for the time being. In terms of how we work with teams, Insght works closely with hiring managers and talent acquisition teams to understand what their goals are, challenges that they're facing in terms of finding top-tier talent or diverse talent, and we work closely with them with that process. So now that we know that recruiting teams and hiring teams are reducing their recruiting budgets, we're waiving our hiring fee for the summer session. So until August 31st, if your teams are hiring, you can work with Insght and partner with us for free. And moving on to Insght and DEI, Insght is committed to bringing underrepresented folks in tech, into tech, as we are one of the pipelines for over 700 companies that we work with. So I personally work on the Day 1 Fellows team, where we're focused on outreach that's more inclusive so we can bring the right type of candidates into our pipeline who then become data scientists, data engineers, data professionals in the industry. And I'll be talking a little bit about some of the strategies that we're putting into place because I think it's relevant to hiring teams. So diversity and DEI and hiring, you're all here to learn about what can employers and employees be thinking about. Diversity hiring in general used to be about numbers, but DEI includes equity and inclusion, which is cultivated by company cultures and policies. And this is only possible if there's an equitable process. And an equitable process requires special care to ensure, procedures are put in place that are free from biases to a candidate candidate's attributes that are not related to job performance like age, gender, race, and ethnicity. So my goal for the talk today is to provide some tips on how you can do this so you can start implementing what you're learning tomorrow. And just a disclaimer, this is not all encompassing, but this is what I've seen work really well at Insght and some of the companies that I interact with in my DEI meetup group that I run in the Bay Area. So, importance of hiring DEI candidates, it's not just the right thing to do, but DEI is going to and will always be a business imperative. So what are some benefits of having diverse team members on your team, diverse thoughts on your team? It leads to higher innovation, different perspectives being on the table, increased creativity, faster problem solving skills, better decision making, increased profits for your company or your team, higher employee engagement, reduce in employee turnover, better company reputation, and the list goes on. And there's a lot of research out there. I have put an appendix slide. I know Rebecca will share with the meetup group the slide, and if you are not part of the meetup group, please feel free to email me and I'm happy to share the slides where it'll have some data points that you can share with your company or team to make the case for DEI. So as again, you know, I'm sure all of you are here because you believe in this and you want to make a change. So one thing to note is that the longer you delay this process, the harder it becomes, and it might lead to a self-fulfilling prophecy in terms of recruiting diverse, non-traditional talent onto your team. And you'll see why when I talk about advise to job seekers, what are job seekers looking for? If you delay this process, you're just going to be hurting your chances of diversifying your talent pool. So thinking about what companies and hiring teams should be thinking at the moment, it requires a shift in thinking around this idea of talent gap. There is no talent gap, there's an opportunity gap. So be intentional about your recruiting process. The goal is to identify and remove any potential biases you have in sourcing, screening, and shortlisting qualified and diverse candidates who may be ignored or turned off or accidentally discriminated against in your processes. One way to think about that is to remove false barriers. How do you improve accessibility, removing these barriers that are false? Be clear about what you want in your job description. So it starts with the job description. For example, what is the competency or attributes you're looking for when you're asking, oh, I need someone with 5 to 10 years of experience in this. What is it that you're looking for? What is it that you're looking for when you're asking for a college degree? Is it a signal for communication? And can you just ask for communication in your job description? So be clear about what you want and don't put stand-in false barriers to prevent folks from entering. Try to eliminate gendered words in your job description by using services like Textio. Textio can help your team kind of give you a guide on, you know, how the words you use in your job description can discourage applicants from applying in the first place. And as a hiring team member or a hiring manager, you can ask for a diverse candidate pool that reflect like the population that your company serves or your team serves. So thinking about who are your customers and I want to reflect that on my team is one way to think about that. Increasing awareness, you know, where are you posting these roles? Who has access to finding out these job openings in your network? You know, if you're looking only at your immediate network and you're beginning your DEI hiring journey, it's going to look similar to what you have at your company. And if you're starting a DEI hiring process, you want to change what your company looks like. So looking at your immediate network may hinder your ability to diversify that pipeline. So reach out to schools in the South, you know, partner with historically Black colleges and universities, partner with diversity organizations like Techeria, who works with Latinx population, or DevColor, who work with Black engineers. And I'll also list I'll list out these organizations in the appendix as well. And you can do a quick Google search and you'll see tons and tons of these organizations. So when you're working with a recruiting agency, make sure that you're asking for diverse candidates, make sure you understand where are they pulling their pipeline from. One thing that I missed at the top in terms of false barriers is the term culture fit. If your culture is all white and all men, or that's what your leadership looks like, then you're going to have a hard time attracting that culture fit. Or if you do attract it, it's going to look like what you want at the table. So maybe focus and reshift that thinking to a value fit or a culture add can help you bring in additional folks who may be turned off by, I need to be a fit in this culture and I don't see myself at the table. Put in checks to evaluate bias in your interview process. Where are your minority candidates or your diversity candidates, non-traditional candidates leaking in your pipeline? Create a research around, which part of the pipeline am I losing these candidates, and what can we do to train our hiring panels or hiring teams to ensure that this doesn't happen. One way to do this is to focus on screening in candidates by doing some blind interviewing techniques. One is removing race, age, gender, social class from the resume. And this key here is like you're screening in folks, not screening out, and you're allowing those who are not at the table to join you at the table. And one thing I'll note is it's really hard for women and non-white names to pass a test, right? So if we can make our resumes as generic as possible to remove race or age or gender, but our names give it away. So is a name really required to track candidates through a hiring pipeline? Another way is to create structured interview process that address any unconscious biases, especially when you're reviewing teams internally. So standardizing that process will be that is equitable for all candidates will help enrich those numbers as well. So add rubrics to standardized questions and evaluations. So what is a good answer to this question? What's an okay answer? What's a bad answer? So your hiring committee, your hiring team can all be on the same page about how to evaluate candidates, what qualifies as a good answer. And it makes it really easy for folks who are on your interviewing team to interview. And if you can at all if it's at all possible, do some bias training for hiring teams and hiring managers. There's a lot of resources out there. And so please use those resources and quickly identify, what are these biases that your hiring committee holds, and how can we educate them on being aware of it? It's unconscious for a reason, and they're gonna be around. So it's not about eliminating them, but it's bringing awareness to these biases. Next is, once you bring someone in, your hiring journey doesn't end there. New employees determine if they want to be a part of your company within their first 6 months on the job. So retention is key to be successful in bringing additional folks into your company. So at Insght, we focus on creating an onboarding process that's very inclusive by focusing on creating connections and success. So connections, one thing to consider is before this employee comes on site for their day one, making sure their immediate team knows how to pronounce their name, what's their preferred pronouns. Once they're on their team, they're more likely to feel inclusive when that's out of the way. And at Insght, we have this system, a buddy system for all new hires that we call onboarding buddies, and they meet with the new hire once a week for the first month. And this allows a new team member to ask questions, ask really silly questions if they need to, without fearing consequences of like, is this going to influence my performance? So it's important to find a buddy or an onboarding buddy external to their immediate team who don't have any influence on their performance reviews. One thing that's always mentioned is the lack of mentorship is often the reason why women or people of color or minorities leave tech or leave a company. So if you're beginning this process, you may not have the right folks on your team or in the company to be a mentor. So as a hiring manager, hiring team, please think about, how can I extend to my external network and bring in mentors for my new hires. And if your company hasn't already thought about this, create ERGs or employee resource groups, which are affinity groups or diversity groups. And if you do have them, make sure your new employees know that they exist. And if their needs are not met by one of those groups, make it clear, how can I start my own ERG and what's the best way to go about doing this. And in terms of thinking about success, how do you create success for your incoming new hires? Provide context on their role. How does their role fit into their larger team? How does the role fit into your organizational goals? Give them context on why they're there. And improve processes around feedback. A study by the Kapoor Center found that women and people of color they all often receive very vague feedback, and men are more likely to than women to hear feedback that's related to the business outcome, or and they often receive more references or on their technical expertise or vision, where women and people of color receive very vague feedback. Like, I'm trying to think of an example. I'll probably follow up with this later, but just know that there needs to be a way to help train hiring managers on how to best give feedback that's going to be effective in improving performance. After your new employee has gone through the onboarding process that you put together, it's a great time to listen to them about, what went well, what didn't go well, how can I improve this onboarding process. They've just spent a few weeks going through this and getting settled with your company, and you're not going to get it right the first time. So use this firsthand experience to improve that process. And if you're beginning this journey in DEI hiring, we can assume that your new hire is not at the decision table, or people like them are not at the decision table. So if they're not at the decision table, make sure their ideas with their names are amplified, and you're amplifying their presence external to your team. Another thing to consider when you're starting in this journey is, when I'm coming into an organization and I look at the leadership or the management and I don't see anyone like me, it might not be great for me to stick around at this company for a long time. But if there is a clear path to success, a clear path to promotion and professional development, maybe I can see myself in the future in those roles. So this is a good opportunity for new teams. If you're new to DEI hiring, to think about, how can I create a standardized process and a very clear process for how promotions are determined, and what are the plans around professional development. So I'm rushing through this pretty quickly, but I'm going to go into talking about the job seekers and giving some advice to job seekers. But I invite hiring managers and team members to continue listening, because the things that I will be talking to job seekers will help you improve your employer brand and candidate experience. So I'll start out by saying, that I have a lot of empathy for job seekers in the current market right now. Your challenge for job search is compounded by the economy, the COVID situation. So I have a lot of empathy for you, and I want you to know that imposter syndrome is real, and try not to tie your worth, your self-worth, your work ethic, whatever it may be, with the rejections that you're receiving, especially the standard no's. Often companies are putting up job descriptions or job roles, even if they have an internal candidate that they're going to promote into that role. So try not to focus on the number of no's or the no's, but focus on, if they are able to give you feedback, focus on the why and focus on improving upon that. But try not to think about the no's and how many no's you're getting. You're going to get no's. And speaking of imposter syndrome, women only apply, there's a statistic out there, women only apply if they meet 100% of the job description, whereas men apply if they meet 70%. So if you think you can do the job and meet 70% of the qualifications that a job description is asking for, I invite you to apply. Job descriptions are often a wish list for the hiring team looking for a unicorn, and they're never going to get 100% of their needs met. So as job seekers, don't take yourself out of the running just yet. And for hiring team members who are listening, again, it starts with a job description. Make sure you're putting in effort to differentiate between, like, is this a job requirement? Is this a must have or a nice to have? And job seekers, be on the lookout for those as well. If they're asking for, oh, you need to have 3 years of experience in a tech tool, can you get that experience and competency within a year? If so, apply and convince them that you didn't need 3 years. You were able to get to that competency within the first year. Going to the job search, if you've already determined the type of companies that you want to work at, one way to kind of evaluate, like, is this a good place for me to work? You got to tie it back in with, what is it that you're looking for and what are your values? And does that, do you see that being reflected in the company? I often look at, what kind of pictures do they have on their website? How do they talk about themselves? Looking at the team page, looking at LinkedIn, looking at mission statements, who are their leaders, who are their managers? If it's not a diverse group of leaders or managers, do they have a plan to change that? Do they have a diversity statement? Do they have diversity goals and initiatives that they put into place? So another way to get behind the screen and, like, understand what's happening is look at Glassdoor reviews, check out stories on themuse.com. I always go to Quora to see, like, how does this company interview folks? So if you have a question, ask it on Quora, and I'm sure that someone's already asked your question. Again, I'll leave you with, in terms of the job search, is it a job qualification or a job requirement? So evaluate, is the company or is this role looking for something that I can do? I can do 70% of it, and then put yourself in the running. In the application process, going to that, like, screening yourself in, remove any information that could identify attributes that are not related to job performance. So race, age, gender, socioeconomic status, family status. And I know that name is a hard one, and it can give it away. So that's why I encourage companies and hiring teams to do the blind review of resumes. In the application process, or even in the phone screening process, do not share your salary expectations or your salary information, especially not your salary history. If you're asked that question, turn that question around on the company and ask what is the range that you're willing to pay for this role. Often people of color and women are negatively impacted by our salary history. So as hiring managers and hiring team members, please don't base a salary on someone's salary history. And then if you have a neurodiversity, if you need accommodations in your interview process, this is the place to ask. This is the stage to ask, because this is when the company is trying to win you over. So if they're unable to provide accommodations in the interview process, you can only imagine what your experience will be like as a team member on that team. And in terms of interview, just remember that you're also interviewing them. You're also screening in opportunities that best fit what you're looking for next. So think about what are your non-negotiables. This is an oh, no for me. For me, personally, I do not like brain teasers. My role doesn't require brain teasers. There's a lot of research around brain teasers are not indicative of job performance or potential. So create your non-negotiables, and if you have a gut reaction about it, listen to it. And then, as I said, you're interviewing them, so ask questions. Make sure to ask questions that are tailored to the person that you're talking to. So if you're talking to an HR or recruiter, you could talk a little bit more about, ask questions around perks or vacation policies or company policies. But if you're talking to a technical team member or a hiring manager, make sure you're asking questions relevant to the role and questions that help them envision you doing that job, so they can see you doing that job. So you're asking questions around, like, if I were on the team and I get stuck on this, who do I turn to on that team? Who's the person that I should be looking at? And that way they can go, well, if you are on the team, so they're envisioning you in that seat. Other questions can be like, who are my stakeholders in this role? I've also listed some examples of questions that you could look at, and Glassdoor and others have lists and lists of questions that you should be thinking about. So even if your questions get answered in the interview process, please have backup questions, because this is the most important time for you to show that you can take on that role. So you want to focus on the role, and you want to help them envision you sitting in that seat with them. So with that, I'll leave you with a few success stories from Insght of women in data, and there are so many more like them. And I know for job seekers, you're going to be joining them soon. So I wish you best of luck. And thank you for your time with me. I tried to go through it as quickly as possible. So please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. I have my email address, and that's my Twitter handle. Happy to take any questions now.
Thank you so much, Thushy. That was great. I know it answered a lot of questions with everything going on right now. So if anyone has any questions, please feel free to submit them in the Zoom chat or on YouTube if you're watching this YouTube live. I'll give you a few minutes or a few seconds. I think Hannah had a question earlier. So she was asking, what would your advice be to companies that don't have a DEI team yet, but are just, getting started building out a program?
Yeah, often many companies don't have this figured out yet. And in the Bay Area, it's a little bit different with like larger tech companies. They have designated team. In smaller startups, usually it falls on a people ops person. So my advice to companies is don't think of DEI as extracurricular work. If you're going to put that responsibility on a people operations team member or someone on the team, make sure that you're tying it with like performance goals and they're being evaluated, but they're also being rewarded for that work, and it doesn't feel like a burden. And try not to put it on a person of color. It shouldn't be an additional burden that they have to carry. If there's interest, then yes, go for it, but be considerate around, where is it going? It's not an extracurricular activity, because you send that signal that it's not important to leadership when it's not tied to performance.
Yeah. And then also, oh, sorry.
No worries.
You also mentioned how, a candidate's going to come in and look at your leadership or look, top down if you've made it a priority or the type of people they've been working with. But for a company that is just kind of in the beginning process, how do they convey that this is an important issue to them if they're like looking to hire someone in that type of executive role, if that makes sense?
Yeah, there's lots of ways that they can do that. It's, they could put out a statement on their website. They could put out a statement within the job description about their mission statement around diversity goals, and just admitting that we're behind, but we're going to start, can be inviting to job seekers.
Great. I think that's it. If there are any more questions, I want to thank everybody for participating in today's talk, or if you were participated in any of the last two talks that we've hosted. Thank you, Thushy. That was great. We will put Thushy's information again in the description that will be posted on Women in Data's YouTube account. So if anyone wants to reach out to her, I know she has some really great appendixes and some resources within that she'd be happy to share with you. She's told me to reach out to her via email, and she'll be happy to send you those resources or the slide deck from today if anybody would like that. With that, I want to thank everyone for coming and for joining us, and we'll say bye. Thank you.
Thank you.